But what about these Rams of Rhode Island? What to expect here?
Well, Brent, we always say to do well in the NCAA tournament, you've got to have a great backcourt. And Rhode Island thinks they have the best backcourt in the United States with Garrick and Owen. They played exceptionally well throughout the course of their careers, did well in the NCAA tournament, and could lead them today. Now,
I'd like to welcome Tom Garrick to the program, University of Rhode Island Hall of Famer, one of the best players to ever put on a URI jersey, second-round draft pick of the Los Angeles Clippers, and currently the assistant women's basketball coach at Vanderbilt University.
Didn't see the pass coming from Garrick, and Michael Jordan got it right back. Garrick reaching in, trying for the steal, caused a travel on Michael Jordan's part. I tell you, this rookie from Rhode Island, Tom Garrick, Sam Vincent.
What was the process like, being a star in Rhode Island, playing for West Warwick, and picking your school and ending up at University of Rhode Island?
Yeah, it wasn't much of a process, to tell you the truth. Being a star in Rhode Island back in 1984 wasn't really much a big deal outside of Rhode Island, is what I learned. I didn't have many scholarship offers. I dabbled with Brown early on. Mm-hmm. That was a pipe dream. I wasn't smart enough to go to Brown. They were interested in me a little bit early on. I was on my way to Bryant College when it was Bryant College, not Bryant University, and it was a Division II school because it was the only scholarship offer I had. I didn't really have a lot of other things going on. There were a couple of Division II schools in the, I think it was the Northeast 10 back then, that I was dabbling with. But if I was going to go to a D2 school, I was going to go to one in state and play with guys that I had known throughout high school, because at that point, a lot of the better high school people in Rhode Island went to Bryant College. So I was on my way to do that. And at the last week of recruiting, I guess, there was a weekend tournament. We didn't really have AAU. I didn't play AAU. I played AAU for maybe 20 games in my junior year, going into my senior year. And I played in the tournament at Marvel Gym on Brown's campus. And Brendan Malone had just got hired at URI as the new head coach. He came to the game. He had a scholarship available that was going unused. And the story goes, he saw me dive on the floor for some loose balls a couple of times. And he was like, well, if I have a scholarship to give, I might as well give it to a Rhode Island kid. And he looks to work hard.
Awesome.
That was it. So on my way to Bryant College, was about to commit there. And Brendan Malone offered me a scholarship in probably the last weekend of recruiting. And I immediately said yes, because I thought I was a Division I player. I thought I had the potential. I wanted to go to PC. PC was the school, right? They were they were the only school on TV. Channel 10 used to show PC games on the weekend, so you got to see them play all the time. I really wasn't familiar with a lot going on at URI up until that point. URI didn't recruit me very much. I think I got a couple of letters from them. I went to visit maybe unofficially one time. But Claude English was the coach there. And Claude was great to me. He treated me very well in the recruiting process, but it just never kind of panned out up until that point. And there was a assistant coach at at PC at the time. His name was Steve Hawker. And he came to watch one of my games. And I think it was the closest I ever came to like a triple-double in my life. And we were playing East Greenwich High School. And I never saw Providence at another one of my games. So it was kind of a heartbreaking thing at that point. But then when I went to URI, I was really, really grateful to have been given that opportunity. And I had a chip on my shoulder from that day forward.
So I was going to ask, obviously as a fan, the PC-URI rivalry is very special. And you grew up in Rhode Island, but just adding that element of having PC as maybe being a dream school to play for, ending up at URI, how much more motivation, let's say, did you have for those PC-URI games?
That goes without saying. Like once I signed a letter of intent to go to URI, I couldn't stand PC. Couldn't stomach them. I didn't like them at all, because it was built into the fabric of that rivalry. It's a great rivalry to this day. I remember I was at a banquet. This is after I graduated, and I can't remember who the coach was at PC at the time, but he was at the banquet, a former coach. And it was a Rhode Island basketball banquet for some reason. I can't remember, but he was kind of trying to downplay the URI PC rivalry. He's like, oh, these are all good kids. There's nothing more to the rivalry. It's just a competitive basketball game. And then when I was asked to speak, I said, well, I have to reevaluate my upbringing. I thought my mom and dad did a good job.
Yeah.
But out of the 4 years we played PC, 3 years, we had a fight, like on the court. We had a fist fight on the court for 3 years. It was just, it wasn't mean, or it was just competitive. And you see these kids in the summer and they're at the Big East school, you're at the Atlantic 10 school. There was just a little bit of an edge to the rivalry. And I think it remains to this day. I'm not, ingrained in it as much as I used to be.
Yeah.
I love Ed Cooley. Ed Cooley is a friend of mine. I watched Ed grow up. He's a little younger than me, a couple of years younger than me. So he came up behind me when I was working out at the South Providence Boys Club with Jamie Benton every day. And Ed would come by and work out with us, and love Ed Cooley. Can't stand Providence. Yep. So even to this day, like, I like to see Ed win, but that's about it.
Yeah. No, I know. I think that's tough for everyone. Especially URI fans. It's like, you have that animosity towards PC, but Ed Cooley, Coach Cooley is just, it's hard not to like him.
Oh, great guy. And honestly, that, tongue in cheek a little bit. I like for them to be successful, except for when they're playing Rhode Island. I like for them to win every Big East game that they play, because I, have admiration for Eddie. But when they play Rhode Island, no, you can't win that game.
No, definitely. So you had talked about being recruited by Malone, and then Tom Penders comes in your third year, your junior year. What was that transition like? I know I talked to Kenny Green. He had mentioned that, Penders opened it up a little bit more for you guys, but just talk about that transition from Malone to Coach Penders.
Styles were completely different. Coach Malone was more of a regimented guy. Mm-hmm. He had been at Syracuse, and they always had some of the top players in the country, and he was used to winning, and we weren't ready to win yet. But I think he doesn't get enough credit for preparing us for the 2 years we had with Coach Penders. We went through some tough times in those first 2 years. I think we won maybe 15 games in total in 2 years. But in my sophomore year, we lost maybe 6 to 7 overtime games. So we were right there. We were on the cusp of being competitive and being good. And I think Brendan Malone made us mentally tough, because it was tough. It was tough in those first 2 years, but he made us mentally tough. And I think that prepared us for when Coach Penders came in, and he basically just said, the best kids are going to play. Mm-hmm. I don't really know you guys that well. I'm just coming in, and it was like a week before the season, I think he got hired. He goes, the people who work hardest, the people I can trust the most, are the people who are going to play. And he kind of, like Kenny said, he opened it up for us. I mean, at that point, I think we were mature enough to adapt to any style. But that running Rams kind of style that he incorporated suited us. You had Silk Owens, who could play on any level at any time from his freshman year all the way through his senior year. You had Kenny Green, who was one of the best big men in the country, it turned out to be. We didn't know it. Yeah. Outside of our bubble. Inside of our bubble, we did. But outside of URI, he was one of the best big men in the country. You had Bonzi Colson, who was like the epitome of a role-playing center, 6'9" guy who could step out and shoot a 15-footer, but who was more of an enforcer and a defender. You had John Evans, who was this athletic three who could get up and down the floor, play above the rim, rebound, set screens. He was really a smart, high IQ basketball kid. Mergen Cena, who transferred in from Seton Hall, 6'7" shooter, a big three. I mean, we had a complete unit, and we had been forged through fire after losing for 2 years. We were ready to win, and it was the right man for the job when Coach Penders came and took over and led us to those 2 really, really good years, my final 2 years there.
You had mentioned Owens. What was it like playing with Owens? Arguably, although if you look at the numbers, not necessarily arguably, but obviously we talk about Tyson and Coutinho are always up there. But as the best backcourt really in URI history, what was it like playing with Owens? How did you guys fit with one another? How did your styles work on the court?
Silk was phenomenal. The backstory to that, to mine and Carlton's friendship, was he didn't qualify for school right away as a freshman, as a high school senior. So he had to matriculate the summer before our freshman year. He couldn't live on campus because he wasn't a qualifier. So Coach Malone asked my mom and dad if Carlton could stay with us for the summer. So you have two kids thrown together who had never really even met each other. He showed up at my doorstep one day and we became pretty fast friends, basketball wise and off the court. But in that summer, I learned how far behind I was actually coming out of high school, because when Carlton came to live with us, we'd go to play basketball every day. It's how we came to know each other. It's how we built our friendship. It was through basketball. And I'd take him to the park or the gym to play with my high school teammates, is what we did every day. And he was unbelievable. He was so much better than all of us that every day my friends would just look at me. He's like, they'd be like, that's who you have to play against and with in college? They were like, good luck.
Yeah.
Like he was 6 foot, maybe 150, 60 pounds coming out of high school. And he was dunking on people in this. I had never seen a kid do that.
Yeah.
So it upped my level of preparation. Like I knew how far I was behind. So I worked really hard to be competitive with Carlton that summer. And he accepted that. He accepted me for it. He never shied at me for it. He never looked down at me for not being able to handle the ball as well as he did or shoot the ball as well. We were just buddies.
Yeah.
And by the time we got to school, he was a starter. That was entrenched. He was going to start. And I had to fight for playing time, and that was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I fought. And that comes from my mom and dad, the level of belief I had in myself and the hard work, my ethic. And that came from my mom and dad, but Carlton showed me what I was in for and how I had to raise my level. So I'll always be indebted to him for that. So he's probably the best player I've ever played against. I've played with and against in college, no doubt.
Yeah.
But yeah, he showed me the way.
I want to share, it may not be great quality. When I do the video, I'll actually put it in, but just the highlights of the Missouri, obviously the first game, the Missouri URI game. And then I had a couple questions about that. Let me.
Yeah, the Band-Aid man.
Yeah, I was joking when I was talking to Kenny Green. I said the only negative of the game was who was guarding Chivas. He said everyone, but that's all right. It was the game plan. It was the game plan. Let him have 70.
Yeah, hold everybody else down. I mean, he was tough, man.
That's tough. The move right there, Coach. I've been putting that around, putting you with the hard and
I love that. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I remember that. I've watched these games with my nephews. I have the good fortune. I'm the youngest of 8, so I have a lot of nephews and nieces, and they all played basketball, and they all were excited about Uncle Tommy being a basketball player. So I've watched those tapes with my son and my nephews, like till they've worn out. So I'm real familiar with all of the highlights from the Missouri game, from the Syracuse game, and unfortunately from the Duke game. But yeah, those are great memories. We had such a deep sense of belief in our team at that point. Like I said, we had been together for 2 years, and we had been getting our heads beat in, but not because we weren't prepared. We just weren't ready to win. Yeah. And that's something I've learned as a coach. Sometimes teams just aren't ready to win. It's not that they don't want to win. You need to go through some things to get to the other side. I liken it to a runner's high. Like you get that stitch in your side, you think you can't go anymore, but once you take 5 more steps, sometimes that euphoria comes over your body and the dopamines or whatever it is kicks in, and you're like, oh, wait, that doesn't hurt anymore. I could run forever. That's how our team became after 2 years. We were like, we've seen the worst. Yeah. Nothing can bother us now. So we used to run through teams. I think one of the things that Kenny mentioned, I saw his video, his clip with you, and he said the thing that galvanized our team was our fight with Temple, I think in our junior year. I concur. Like I agree with that. But what he didn't say is we were ready to fight every game. We just had this bond. And if you messed with one of us, you messed with all of us. So if a point guard was harassing Silk or gave Silk an elbow, he'd just give somebody a look and it was on. Or if a 2 guard did something to me, or if somebody hit Kenny or John or Mergen, we just look at each other and be like, okay, well, we're not losing this fight. We're not losing this game. And we had been through the fire together. So when that thing came up with Temple, they didn't know that they were kicking the bee's nest. They had no idea. We were Rhode Island. They were I think they were top 5, not the number 1 team in the country. They were coming into our gym. It was a big game, and they thought they were going to bully us. And I remember going to the bench after Silk got his tooth knocked out, and it being said, we might lose the battle, but we won't lose the war.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody just knew what that meant. And we went back out there and we just took care of business. But that type of, I don't condone that, obviously, now coaching men's basketball, but it was a different time and it was a different mentality. We were like, no, you're not going to come in our gym and do that. And that's how we handle our business. And that forged us and carried us for the next 2 years. And like I said, Missouri and Syracuse had no idea what they were facing. And that's what you get. Nowadays, you don't see it as much because of the transfer rules and the one and dones, but we had been playing together for 4 years at that point. You had, 3 or 4 seniors, 4 or 5 juniors on that team, and we had seen pretty much everything a basketball game could offer. And we had a coach who believed in us and who, loosened the reins, and he let us run and he let us press and he allowed us to be who we were. And it was just lightning in a bottle. We had really good assistant coaches. Al Skinner, who went on to coach BC and do fabulous things. Al's one of the best coaches I've ever been around. Jamie Campaglio, Rich Pagliuca, Eddie Malone. We just had from top to bottom, from the coaches to the players. It was really a good time in URI basketball. And I'm fortunate that I was able to be a part of it, a Rhode Island kid. It turned into be a dream come true. Like, the Providence thing was a pipe dream. URI was where I needed to be. It's where I belonged. And it's been good to me.
Yeah. Well, and it worked out. It worked out for you.
Worked out really, really well.
It's crucial. But what about you, just even personally, for those 2 games, the Missouri and Syracuse? I mean, I think it was you'll know, 28 and 26. I know they're the 2 highest scoring games from a URI player in the tournament still. And I know that Missouri game, you had about 25 in the second half. Was that, did something just click? Was it the motivation factor? I mean, like I said, you put in points, the whole season, but just for that tournament, that run obviously was extremely special individually, shooting wise. What kind of zone were you in?
I was in, and this is honest, I was in a 2-year zone, and Coach Penders helped put me there. I had 25 points in the second half of the Missouri game because I couldn't score in the first half somehow. On that tape, like I said, I've watched it so many times. On that tape, at the beginning of the second half, I miss a shot, I get the rebound, and I miss the putback, but I get fouled. So I'm walking to the line to take 2 free throws. And in the background, you can hear somebody scream, "Garrick, come on." And it's Coach Penders. And he just, that's how he was like, bring it. Like, I was never going to stop shooting. Silk and I were never going to stop shooting. That was the way our team was built. Kenny got whatever he needed to get in the paint. And to his credit, he was a warrior. Like, he would go get it off the backboard, offensive rebounds, block shot, whatever. The team was built to know just desserts of our own. It was because this is what Coach Penders had put in line. This is the way he thought we could be most successful. It was a guard-oriented team, and Silk was going to shoot the ball, and I was going to shoot the ball. And then when we needed to, Kenny was going to get inside touches. Bonzi, John, Mergen, they were going to get what they could get as they got it. And credit to those guys completely. They made our team what it was, and to take their roles so seriously and without any hesitation is what made us so successful. But those 2 games in the NCAA tournament, I didn't know that. You said there's the 2 highest scoring games in the history of the school. It was because I was programmed at that point to shoot and to keep shooting. And we worked so hard in practice. And this is what I try to get along to people I coach now. The game is the easy part if you've done your work in practice. We used to work so hard in practice at playing together, at shooting the ball, repping shots, getting shots where we were going to take them in the game, who was going to get the shots, how they were going to get the shots, that it became second nature. It wasn't about Missouri. It wasn't about Syracuse. They could do nothing to stop what we were doing. It was just going to be a case of whether we were making our shots or missing our shots. And that's how it played out. In one half, I didn't hit too many shots. And in the second half, I shot the same shots and I shot the ball just as many times. they were going to go in my mind. And fortunately they did. And that's the way I followed Silk suit. Silk, he never wavered. His confidence was rock solid. And from the day I met him, I started to pick up those traits. I thought I believed in myself until I saw guys like that play. Yeah. And he had a different level of confidence, a different level of belief. And that kind of infiltrated our team and washed over our team. And we all adopted that because our leader was the best player on the court most nights. And we just fell into that bath of belief that he had. And we rode it to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, it was awesome. You know, for me, I was born in '86, so I was in diapers during that run. But, you know, I was told stories, you know, from my father and from my older brothers about that run. But just going back and looking at that, especially that Syracuse game, you know, one thing that commentators consistently talked about throughout that game, especially at the end, was, you know, your father and your family there. Can you talk a little bit about what it meant for you just to have them there and be a part of such a big moment for you in your career?
Yeah, it was normal. My mom and dad always supportive of every one of their children in whatever we did. I look back on it now and it holds a different place in my heart. Like both my parents have since passed, and it holds a different place in my heart because it just reminds me of them and how they raised their children and how loving they were and how supportive they were. My mom, the story is my mom didn't go to Carolina because there was a wedding at our church. She was cooking for the wedding. It was already predetermined. So she couldn't break the schedule. She didn't want to disappoint the people who were getting married. So she stayed back and worked in the kitchen at our church to get the wedding food prepared. So my dad, my oldest brother, my oldest brother, John, and my sister, Stacy, and her son, Stacy, went to Carolina for the games. And to see them in the stands and to see my dad waving his towel, it's nothing that I hadn't seen all throughout my career, but to have the world see it and get that view of it, I welled over with pride that my father would get the attention that he had given his family his whole life. And I thought that was the neatest part of it. And my father's a really neat dude. He had been blinded in World War II. He, you know, went on to do great things with his life and raise a family. He never saw my mom. He met my mom in the hospital when he was recovering. So he never actually laid eyes. He was blinded before he met my mom on his wife or his 8 children. And he knew us like the back of his hand. Like I didn't know my dad was blind until I was like 5 years old. I didn't get the concept because he was so independent. He did everything that he wanted to do. He, you know, and it sounds funny, but as a 4-year-old, I'm thinking, if you're blind, you can't see, you run into stuff. I never saw my father bump into anything in my house, in our church, out in the public. He just had this air about him that I wasn't really understanding of. But blind people aren't handicapped. They just have a different fight than we have, right? So I learned that type of thing growing up through my father. You look at people and you automatically label them as handicapped or unable to do certain things. And I didn't see that. So I've always had an affinity for people who do have things to deal with. I kind of gravitate to that because I grew up with that my whole life. So having my father there, it meant everything to me. I wish my mom could have been there more, but right after the games, we'd call her, and then we went to the Meadowlands, and she definitely was like, I don't care whose wedding it is, I'm not missing this one. So it was a pretty neat time to have my family around.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, it's incredible. And about that Duke game, just real quick, is that a product of, we want to see Duke in the Final Four, so let's call, 3 quick fouls on Garrick?
You can say that. I won't, because, well, yeah, I can say that now. I like PC. I can't stand Duke right now. Like unlike PC, I like to see Ed Cooley win. Duke, I don't care who's there. Yeah. If they lose, it's a good day. We lost by 1 point to Duke. They were a good team. Yeah. Coach Krzyzewski had him rolling again early. This is early in his career. He had him rolling. And we knew the challenge. But I had 3 fouls, 2 of which I didn't think were fouls. But I'm a really good loser, I guess, in the sense that I'm not a sore loser. Yeah. Like, as long as I've played my hardest, and I learned this from my mom and dad, as long as I play my hardest, I give it my all, I've supported my teammates. I've had fun. Then you win some, you lose some. That one was a little harder to swallow because I didn't think that I had a fair chance of playing a complete 40-minute game like I had my whole career. I thought some of the foul calls, but you play the game that, you play the hand that you're dealt. And we had a chance to win that game, even with that. Silk was phenomenal that game. Kenny Green, Mergen Cena, John Evans stepped up. All of our role players took a bigger role because I just didn't have it that night. And they almost led us to an Elite Eight. And I was so proud of those guys that night and so disappointed that I had an off night. But yeah, I can't say that now in my current job after games, but I can say it for a game that was 30 years ago. Yeah, the refs messed that one up for us, definitely.
Well, it wasn't an off night. It's hard to do stuff when you can't get in the game.
Yeah, I should have been smarter though. I should have been smarter, right? You have to figure out how the refs are calling it, and I didn't until it was too late. I looked at the bench and I'm shaking my head to say, please don't take me out. Coach Penders was already like, you're not coming out. Figure it out. Yeah. You're going to play the rest of this game, but just don't fall out. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And that's the kind of trust and belief that he instilled in us. And I think that's why we were so good. He made us mature basketball players. I figured out how to play with fouls. Silk, Kenny, all of our careers. He was like, no, you guys aren't coming out. We played like 7 guys for 2 years. Not that we didn't have capable people on the bench, but that's the people that Coach Penders thought we could roll with and win with. There was no such thing as foul trouble on our team. Like that rule that you get 2 fouls in the first half, you're coming out, that didn't exist for us. It really didn't. And it made me a better basketball player. It made me a more mature basketball player. And it's how I try to coach now. You have to figure things out, just like in life. And I always think that basketball, athletics is a microcosm of life. You have to figure it out. Like things aren't always going to go your way, but you always get treated equally, right? Maybe, or fairly, not equally. So adversity builds character, right? So that's one of those things that we were taught on that team. And I think it has served us well going forward.
Looking at that bracket, you beat Duke. You guys would have played Temple. That would have been, the first Atlantic 10 team to be in the Final Four, and you would have played them again.
It wouldn't have been. I can say this now. Yeah. Who knows? I'd like to think, and if you ask anyone on our team, because Temple had given it to us for 3 games that year, they just were really good. Then they weren't going to beat us the 4th time, and they ended up losing that next game to Duke by about 30. I think they got. Or to Georgetown. I can't remember who they lost to.
It was to Duke. It was to Duke.
They got crushed.
Yeah.
And there's no way that we weren't ready at that point in our careers to step up and beat them for the first time in my 4 years. So, but we didn't make it that far. So, it is what it is. And I think that's the way it was supposed to happen. We were supposed to lose. They were supposed to go get beat. Duke was supposed to make it to the Final Four, whatever it is. And they build their dynasty. But we had our run, and it was a really good run. Yeah. It was a historical run for us.
Definitely. And just briefly, you guys have that run, you graduate, and then that summer, I was reading a story. Obviously, you get drafted by the Clippers in the 2nd round, and I was reading that your parents had a draft party, a viewing party in West Warwick at your house. And when Elgin Baylor called, who was the general manager of the Clippers that year, you weren't there. So just explain to me that story. I think that's, it's fascinating. Just for your parents who actually got to witness it live, and then you coming into the house and finding out you've been drafted by the Clippers in the 2nd round.
Yeah, I took off. I couldn't take, I've always had this thing with my mom and dad. I've loved them so much, and they have shown our family and all of our kids so much love. I never wanted to embarrass them. I never wanted to put them in a situation where anything I did would reflect poorly. So after the 1st round, I wasn't really nervous. I didn't expect to get drafted until maybe 2 weeks after the tournament was over. And then it became like, this could really happen for you, a reality type thing. And as I'm sitting in my house, it was a different vibe. I think it was in the afternoon too. I don't even know what time the draft was on. It wasn't at night. It was in the middle of the day. The draft was going on. And my name wasn't getting called. And I was like, wait a minute, these people are at my house thinking that I'm going to get drafted. That'll be so embarrassing for my mom and dad, not me, whatever. And so I left. I had one of my best friends, Matt Lombardo, a high school teammate of mine, came by in his car, picked me up. I walk out the back door. Nobody knew I left. And we went driving around West Warwick for about an hour. And West Warwick is only a town where it takes 10 minutes to drive around.
Oh, yeah.
We drove around for an hour, just places that we grew up, old courts that we went to, that we played at, went shot around. And there were no cell phones back at that time. So I walked back in the door after an hour, and my mom and dad are going, you need to call Elgin Bailiff from Los Angeles. He just called here about 45 minutes ago, and he has some news for you. And then it was a happy moment. You know, they didn't ask me where I went. They understood. But the thought of embarrassing my parents at that moment, and it was a silly thought, but it was a thought of a 21-year-old kid who was in a situation that he had never thought he would be in. I was happy to be there, but I was also a little embarrassed if I didn't get my name called, and I did. So it was a really good night at the Garrick house, just because I could see the pride well up in my mom and dad.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then a West Warwick kid going to LA.
Think about that.
I know.
Think about the percentages on that. A West Warwick Wizard.
Yep.
Not only just playing Division I basketball and having a good career, solid career, going on to the Sweet 16 and playing on national TV, getting interviewed by Packer and Musburger. It was a dream come true, you know. And then to get drafted, and then to have the realization that, wait a minute, I could probably make this league. It was phenomenal. And I'm glad that I had the family that I had, because I was able to keep my head on straight and not get too full of myself. And it, you know, carried me. I had a great 4-year experience playing in the NBA. Yeah. Something that not a lot of people can say, and I'm really proud of that.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about legacy. It's a topic, it's very frustrating for me. So I can't imagine you. And I'm getting the sense, as I talk to a lot of URI greats, that it's not just a fan's frustration, but just about commemorating and celebrating those who built this program, the leaders, the stars. Obviously, you are in that group. You know, I bring my kids to the games. I always like to look up to the rafters and talk to them and say, this is who should be there. Can you explain a little bit to me what you think URI could do better, and your thoughts on the commemorating and celebrating, or the lack thereof, at URI?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. All of that is a really good question. And I guess that's the best way I can frame it. I don't quite understand why the history isn't more celebrated, or the way that we celebrate our history at URI. I've been confused. I don't really think about it a lot, because I don't want to make it a personal thing. I'm not trying to self-grandize or anything like that. But there's no way that Silk Owens shouldn't have his jersey up there. There's no way that Kenny Green shouldn't have his jersey up there. If you want to make me a part of that, so be it. But take me out of it. I don't really care. But those guys deserve that. They've all come back. They've graduated, to the best of my knowledge. If that's a criteria, I don't know if there is any criteria. I don't know if there is any plan or regimen or anything to that nature that says that that's even a possibility. I don't know if they've thought about it, but I don't know how you don't think about that at that stage. I think there was a 78 team, there was an 88 team, and there was a 98 team that made deep runs into the NCAA tournament. And I don't know if there's anything else other than that in the history of the school that predates, Frank Keeney and the WNIT runs. And that's well documented, and there's history there, but that's enough to celebrate, I think. And I think that they're deserving of having their numbers put up in the rafters, or their banners put up in the rafters and celebrated. And maybe they have been in their way, but I think more could be done. And like you said, it gives a history, right? It's a foundation to keep building on, and for people to have something to aspire to, or to be inspired by. Tyson Wheelers, Katino Mobley. Like you said, I watched E.C. Matthews. The kid was phenomenal. what's the history there though? You know what I mean? Like, what is he shooting for? Like, does he know about Sly Williams? And is there a Sly Williams jersey up in the rafters? And the history of Sly Williams and PC and Dave Gavitt and all of those things. It's somewhere. I just don't see that it's where everybody can access it and see it visibly. We're in the Hall of Fame. I'm in the Hall of Fame. Silk's in the Hall of Fame. I'm pretty sure Kenny is. And that, if that's as far as it goes, and if that's what we've built our history on, I'll accept that. But I just don't know if anybody's thought any further than that, because that Silk Owens kid was phenomenal. Yeah. And there's not too many of him that come along. And URI had him for 4 years, and they have him for the rest of his life because he's now part of our history. I don't know why you wouldn't want to celebrate that consistently by having people be able to look up and say, yeah, do you remember when that guy was here? Do you remember some of the things he did? I just think it would be beneficial all the way around, but I'm not making those calls. And don't get it wrong. I love Rhode Island. Yeah. I love my school. But I have been in numerous arenas around the country, coaching, playing, and it means something when you go into Fog Allen Arena and you see Danny Manning's jersey up there, along with the numerous other people who have had their jerseys put up in the rafters at that school. Yeah. It means something when you go to UCLA and you see those banners up there. It means something when you go to Florida State or anywhere in the country that celebrates their former athletes.
Yeah. And, you know, for me, as a simple fan of, you know, parents who went to URI, obviously I've been going to URI games my whole life. It's not like URI is excelling when it comes to fan attendance. Now, when they're doing well, they show up. Takes a little while, but they show up, and it's one of the best environments in college basketball when you have the Ryan Center full. But the lack of celebration and commemorating, I think, has just provided this huge gap. Especially when you look at, you know, someone like me who grew up with Mobley and Wheeler, right? If I was going to games at Keeney and I was, you know, hearing about Garrick, I was hearing about Green, I was hearing about Owens, and I see you guys there and they're commemorating, constantly commemorating. That's something that, you know, I pass down to my kids. And I'm also then passing down the Wheeler years, the Mobley, the Reynolds Dean, Preston Murphy, Lamar Odom. These guys, if they're being celebrated, right, it builds momentum for the program. So even if there are some off years, you still have that momentum, and that memory continually lives on. You don't wait till the 25th anniversary, the 50th anniversary, and then bring everyone back and expect everyone to celebrate. That's not how you build a program, in my opinion. So that's what's frustrating, you know, I think, for me. And I think a lot of fans as well.
Yeah. I think there's a deep enough history there, like you said, to build upon and to have it continue to self-perpetuate itself so that it continues to grow and grow and grow. I don't know. I haven't been back in years because my job keeps me away. But like you said, the attendance, I don't know what the attendance is like, but I'm sure that there's a foundation there. There's people in Kingston, there's people in South Kingston, North Kingston, East Greenwich, West Warwick that would love to come see URI basketball every night. It's a 40-minute drive. Yep. Shoot down the highway and catch some really great basketball, right? And to do that, like, you have to do different things to keep the fans enticed. You have to win, but you have to do different things to keep the fans and the history and that loyalty there. Maybe that could be one way. I don't know. And I don't know if that's the reason you should do it. I think those guys merit that above and beyond that, right? So he came back, he finished school, he did everything that he was supposed to do. Yeah. He's a really good example of a great student athlete at that university. Why not celebrate it?
Yep, no, definitely. And that's what I say. It doesn't, not that should matter. It's just kind of that, you know,
but it's a component of it. Yeah, I agree with you.
Like, why not? There's nothing negative. That's
unless someone can tell me that there's a policy that they don't retire jerseys or put them up in the rafters, which I've never heard. I just don't understand how a couple of those guys aren't up there.
Yeah. Well, and there are people up there. So, you know, there's Michelle's up there, Keeney's up there.
Yeah.
So you know, and I've reached out. I know other people have too, and I really haven't heard that policy, but